Hey guys, welcome back to Not Your Feller's Finance. Abby here. We have Sarah Aviram for part two today. As I mentioned, last week we did part one, which was all about Sarah paying off $80,000 in debt. And today we're doing part two, which is all about talking about money. So how much Sarah was making as a New York City HR leader, her salary, what she started at, what she ended at, how bonuses work, all of that good stuff. But also she's going to dish out the details about how you personally can grow your income with your current job or by switching jobs. So Sarah, welcome back. Thank you for being on here again for part two.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. Yeah, as Abby said, I've spent most of my career in HR and talent training and development roles within corporate organizations, big like Fortune 500 companies. So I had a lot of access to people's salaries, which was really interesting. And I'm happy to share a little bit more about what I've seen work really well in getting raises and advancing in your career.
Cool. I just think talking about people's careers are so interesting because as I was in high school and having to pick a career path, like I was science all the way, but I do think that had I had more knowledge out there about different what people do and what that looks like and their salaries and things like that, I could have made a different decision back in high school rather than going through 6 years of college and not using a master's degree. So that's a lot of money that isn't towards what I'm currently working on. So that's why I kind of wanted to bring some of these segments to you guys to really see what's out there. And even if you're watching this and you're 30 or 25 or however old you are, 16, like you can change career paths. So don't think you're stuck. And, if this opens a new idea or door for you, then, you know, that's awesome and explore that. So back to you. Let's talk more about this HR leadership role and like kind of how you got into that and what your starting salary was and how you grew that through your career.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to start by like telling this story about the beginning of my HR career. Some of you might know Suze Orman, the like internationally known financial advisor, and she actually held this talk at our organization for all employees at the time. And so she's talking about IRA planning. I stand up, microphone in hand, to ask a question in front of like 300 of my colleagues. And she asked me in front of everyone, she's on a stage, so how much money do you make? And I'm literally like standing there in front of all of these faces looking at me, and I'm like, and and then she goes, well, let me ask you another question, because she saw like I wanted to hide under my chair. She said, well, let me ask you this, are you single? And I was like, and then it was just getting worse and worse. And essentially she goes, she makes an example out of me and says, I bet you tell your friends all the details of your dates, but you don't dare talk about money. We don't like to talk about money. And like, I don't think her point was to have me say my salary in front of everyone, but she was trying to drive home the point that like, we'll share all the details of like intimate parts of our lives with our friends, but we don't dare discuss how much money we make.
Yeah.
I know, Abby, this is like a stigma that you're trying to break on
Yes.
on Not Your Father's Finance. And I think that it's awesome.
I just like laugh about that because I've been like horrifying my parents for the last few years when I decided I was sick of it. Actually, I've been doing this like a lot growing up, and then they're like, you can't ask your uncle how much his house was, and I was like, I can look it up online. Like, I'd rather just have him tell me so I don't have to go through the effort. Uh, but yeah, I think like I've been horrified there, but like it's been so cool to be around you and some other people, specifically on remote year, and some other friends I have that's just like open to talking about it. I've pushed one friend too far when she was like, okay, I'm done talking. Like, I'm done. And I'm like, okay, I respect that. Like, I'm not gonna like,
Yeah.
but I think even like introducing the idea to get people to start to like be like, why is it weird to talk about money? And I asked her, and she was just like, because it is. And I'm like, okay, but like, I get it. It's the olden way of like, you're not supposed to talk about that stuff, but like, why is that still the way it is today? And like, how can we change that? Because I think it's really benefiting corporations and not us as individuals.
Oh, 100%. And knowledge is power. And like you said, I worked in HR and I did have access to people's salaries. And it was interesting to know like what different roles made different amounts of money, like depending on what experience you had and your level and the department you were in and stuff like that. And like having that knowledge, and like obviously I didn't abuse it in a way, but once you're like, oh, okay, like here's what people should be demanding and asking for. And let me tell you, it'd be great if companies, you know, said you're being paid well below the market for the value you bring to the organization. Like we want to pay you more. And very often they do, because they don't want to lose top talent to other organizations. But sometimes they're like, well, if we can get away with paying her 60,000 when we should be paying her 80, like why would we pay her more?
Yeah.
And if you don't know that information, there's not much you can do about it.
So
And
the
I
more we
talk about
talk
this in the
about it,
book,
yeah.
Remotivation. I talk about this story. This woman, I think she's in her mid 30s, and she had like $200,000 in student loan debt or something crazy. And she said and she was able to pay that off in 10 years with no help from anyone. And she said the single biggest factor that helped her to pay down that debt was asking her coworkers how much they were making, because she realized that she was actually making 40% less than people that had the same job. And
Wow.
in order to deal with that taboo of not asking, especially your colleagues, because that can be awkward,
Yeah.
she uses this over under method. And she said, like, okay, do you make over 100K or under 100K? Like she would just like keep going up. So like it's kind of the same as just telling someone, but she felt like it kind of diffused the taboo question and she got the information she needed.
Okay. Wow. That is like, I love that story. And it kind of reminds me of my own story and just like such a like small way. I don't know if I told you guys the story yet, so I'll say it briefly, but I was working at this company and I asked a girl at a different company where I worked PRN for, and I was thinking about taking her full-time job. And I was like, well, how much do you make? Cause like, I guess depending on how much you make, I'm not going to take your full-time job over. And I think she was making like $7 less than me an hour. And so I think at the time I was making like $37 an hour and she was making $30 an hour. And I was like, what? Like I would never take your job for 30, obviously, because we're doing the same thing. And then on top of that, you have 2 more years experience than I do. I was like, do you understand how low you're being paid? And I was so concerning. And then I wanted to talk to other coworkers about it. And they were like, you can't talk about that. It's illegal. Don't talk about it. And they were like all weird. And like, I was like, that's an issue. We understand that. They're like, yeah, it is, but like, it's illegal to talk about. I, it's just,
Yeah, no,
wow.
it's not, it's not illegal to talk about, but look, there are companies these days that are actually publishing the salaries of all employees. Like companies are trying to push the button and try different things and make things like very transparent. Some companies are eliminating the opportunity to negotiate when they offer you a job and they offer you a specific salary. Google did a study on this because women tend to negotiate less than men, and
Mm,
you're offered a similar salary, but the men feel more confident negotiating and they're given the more money, and the women don't feel comfortable with it and they're not. And that you shouldn't be paid more because you're necessarily a better negotiator. And I know a lot
no,
of people might argue with that. Look, I've done my fair share of negotiating, but when I negotiate, it's for the sisterhood, it's for the brotherhood. It's not just for me, right? I'm like, I'm I'm asking to be paid what I think is the value of my work and experience and performance. And anyone else who plays at that level should also be paid the same way.
right.
And there was a time, and I don't know what they changed in salary, but I know that I negotiated even more vacation days at a company, and they offered 2 weeks, and I asked for 3, and so they gave it to me, and then they went right to my friend from business school who got also offered, and they gave her 3 weeks. She didn't even ask for it, but because I did, and they gave it to me, they just like went and gave it to her.
Yeah.
So like when we ask to be, ask for things that are aligned with what our value is, like everyone I think wins.
That is so cool. I actually didn't know. I never considered that you could negotiate vacation days.
Oh, you can negotiate everything. I love it.
Okay. What else? Is there anything else that we should be negotiating when we're applying for
Yeah, you
jobs?
can negotiate equity, you can negotiate bonuses, you can negotiate sign-on bonuses. Yeah, I've done it all.
Amazing. Okay. That's such good news. Um, I think I interrupted you a while ago. Let me go back really quick in case you had something to say. When you were talking about the lady who um, she was able to like ask her employers, like, or sorry, all of
Yeah.
her
No,
coworkers
I think yeah, I
salary.
think that was no, I think we got to the main gist of the story. And of course, so then when she went to her employer, she can't just be like, "Oh, pay me more. I heard people are making that." She that was potentially part of her case, but she obviously had to, and this goes to the question we'll get into more, how do you ask for more money or how do you get paid more? I mean, first is you have to be performing at a level where there's no reason for them to say no, right? You have to be performing at your best, like potentially at a level higher than what you are. You have to be noting all of your accomplishments, how you're adding value to the business, like how you've, increased their revenue or whatever metric that you have that you can measure that shows the value that you're bringing to the business. You should think about the time of year that's appropriate. A lot of companies, corporations do raises twice a year. So if you're asking kind of off cycle, it's not always the best time for a company to say yes. So typically, like, you want to be doing that right before decisions are made about promotions and stuff like that.
Is that like same, like, is that like a certain month we should know about,
It
or?
tends to be, companies do their financial year is not like a calendar year, so they do
Right.
it differently. I would say on average, it tends to happen at the beginning of the year and at the middle of the year, but it's really going to depend on each person's, and some companies just do it once a year. So kind of has
You could
to,
probably ask your manager and see like
yeah,
when they do
totally.
review that. I think yeah, I think my company does like once a year you can get a
Yeah,
raise. But
totally.
with mine I got a little bit lower salary than I wanted. So then they were like, we can review it again in 3 to 6 months. So they kind of gave me a little like, okay, we're not gonna make you wait a year for that. We'll get it to you early.
Right, right. Yeah, totally. And you also want to make sure like you're asking at the appropriate time with your manager. You're going into the conversation talking about what you love about your job, all the accomplishments you've had, the value you bring to the organization. And then you can kind of transition into asking that you've done your market research. You feel like, the fair value for that we should be paid for your job is X, and you'd love to work toward that. And, what else could you be doing to, you know, get paid that amount of money, and then have that open discussion with your manager.
Amazing. So is there anything, that's a good point. So you're talking to your manager about this. And if you are a manager out there watching this, it's really cool when your manager goes to bat for you. My manager right now is going to bat for me every single time. She went to bat for me when I negotiated my initial salary. She went to bat for me when I don't get a bonus this year because I haven't been at the company long enough. I started in November. So obviously I didn't expect to enter your bonus, but I was there last year and I got laid off. And so I missed like this chunk and I was there too early the end of the year last year. So I also didn't get a bonus last year. And she's like, that's shitty. Like, I'm going to try to get you a bonus. Like, I can't guarantee it, but I know that's shitty. So let's try to do something
Yeah,
about that. And so it's really cool when you like make that relationship with your manager and like the manager can help you fight.
totally. And look, sometimes it truly is out of their control. And it's
100%.
finance team making the decision, the CEO, whoever it might be. But it is awesome when you can, your manager sees the value that you're providing to the organization and does go to bat for you.
Okay, so you gave us a few tips about how we can like go into a meeting and ask for a higher raise, but like, do you have any other tips or tricks that you've said? And I think you've written about it in your book too, but like, how else can people increase their income like today or like this year?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, like if you are interviewing for a job right now, before you sign anything or agree to something, like you have the most power in your hands before you start working at a company. If they've extended an offer to you, they want you. They've decided you're the person, and you now hold the ball in your court. So this is the best time to negotiate. And as I mentioned before, like there's many ways to negotiate your salary. There's actual base salary, and then there's potential bonus. It could be 5, 10, 15, 20% bonus. You can negotiate how much you get based on your performance. You can negotiate a one-time sign-on bonus. So let's say in your example, you're leaving your company to go somewhere else, so you're going to miss out on the annual bonus from your prior company if you leave a couple months before the end of the year or whatever it might be. So can you negotiate a sign-on bonus with the new company to kind of compensate for what you're leaving on the table from your prior company? So oftentimes companies will do that if that's the case, or they'll do that if they really want you to start earlier than you're ready to start, or if you do negotiate your salary and they're not able, say you want 80K and they're like, we can only give you 70K, but we'd give you a 5K sign-on bonus or a 10K sign-on bonus. And why they're more willing to do that is because anytime you get a merit increase or anytime you get like an annual bonus, it's not like accruing, and the percentage is not accruing on top of your base salary. It's like a one-time thing. So it's definitely better for the company than for you, because like, let's say that year you get a 5% increase in your salary. That's now based on your 70K salary, not on an 80K salary. So
Okay.
obviously it's better to have the base higher than get a one-time bonus,
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
you can't get the extra money into your base salary. You want to ask for it and potentially sign on bonus. Now, I don't think that's a super typical thing in lots of companies, a sign on bonus, but it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst they can say is no. And then if the company is offering equity, that's certainly like, it's not like money in your hands, but that's certainly a potential. And I think I talked already about, yeah, annual bonuses. And I've negotiated those, like, oh, we'll give you a 15% annual bonus based on your performance. And I've negotiated that to like 20%. There's always ranges at companies. Like, it's pretty amazing to see. And as working in HR, I was able to see like what the salary ranges are for the same role. And so it could be like a $30,000 spread, or as you get higher up in a level in organization, it could be like a $60,000
And why do you
spread.
think that is? Why do you think there is such a spread for salaries for the same job?
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it's based on geographic location. So some companies will just like pay more because it's more expensive to live in New York. So they feel like they have to pay more money to employees based in New York than, based some in other at a lower cost of living city. Sometimes it's based on your experience. So like if you just got promoted to a director position and you've literally doing it for 3 days, you're not going to get paid as much as someone who's been in that role for 2 years that has like incrementally gone up. And also if they put you at the top of the range and you do a fantastic job, it's like
Where
where
do you go?
and then where do you go, unless they can obviously ideally can promote you. And so yeah, so there's definitely benefits of being at the top of the range. Who doesn't want to be at the top of the range? But it makes it more difficult to move somewhere. So that's when you can start getting a little bit more creative. And that's where I've seen like a percent of bonuses increase, because when they can't increase your base salary or else it'd be out of a range, they're like, all right, we'll give you this one time, money at the end of the year.
Yeah. So you sound like, I know you're a very confident woman, but you're sounding like a confident woman. And I want to know, for anybody out there that's watching, that's like feeling uneasy already about the thought or the idea to walk into their manager's office or on this negotiation, they just got a new job and it's like, whether it's pandemic or not, like maybe even like because it's pandemic, it's like, can you be picky? I need this job. So like, is there any point where it's like you got the job offer and you're negotiating salary that it's like they're all of a sudden going to drop you? Or how do you like go about that with confidence and not being like, ooh, they gave me enough, like I shouldn't ask for more, like, and not feel like sleazy or like weird about it?
Yeah. First of all, it's really going to depend on the reasons that they're giving you. Like, because a no is not never. Sometimes it's just like not right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do have to be sensitive to what's going on in the organization. If because of COVID or other reasons, your organization is not in a good financial situation, yes, we want to be sensitive and not just be like, hey, can I have that raise? And they're like, do you know what's going on in the world right now? So a lot of times you can have a discussion like, hey, I've been killing it at my job. You gave me a fantastic performance review. I was really hoping to get promoted this year. Um, and start it there, see what they say. And then you can say like, I want to be sensitive that right now is a challenging time for the business and for the world. Could we come back to this discussion in 6 months from now? Or what else would you like to see from me in my performance, or what other deliverables in order to feel confident in taking my salary or my title to the next level? So if you can kind of like agree with them, like, yes, we're going to check in 3 months, in 6 months, or whatever that date is, you kind of keep that alive and put that meeting on the calendar, and make sure that they're aware of it. So that's a good way where you can keep the conversation alive but also be sensitive to what's going on in the world.
Okay. And so that kind of sounds like somebody that's already employed that is like trying to negotiate something there.
Mhm.
But what about you just got that job offer and you're like, okay, so 70K, I was hoping for 75, 80, something like that. Like, how does the negotiation go? It's like, you're cracking back. I don't know if it's over email, it's over Zoom, probably varies depending on the individual, but how can you go with confidence and just, are you backing that up based on your abilities, or like how do we back
Yeah.
up making
Yeah.
more, asking for more?
Right. I think similarly, it's based on obviously they don't know your performance within their company because you haven't
Right.
started yet, but it's based on your years of experience in other organizations, the value that you brought, the skills that you have, and doing your market research and knowing, what the market, and there's like different websites like Glassdoor and PayScale and other sites that you can go to kind of see what other people in a similar role are making in similar industries. So go armed in there with information. And just so you know, there's certain states like New York where it's actually not legal for the recruiter of the company to ask you what you're currently making. So they only can ask you what you would like to make, but they're no longer allowed to ask you what you're currently making. And you don't want to give away that information if you don't have to, because let's say you're being underpaid in your current job. Like, why should you continue to be underpaid?
Why do we
So you
think
always want
about
to,
what do we
mhm,
think about offering a different price? So like,
yeah,
how much are you making? Like, let's say I was actually making 60, but I was underpaid. And I said 75. I'm making 75. I would like to hit 80 or 90. Like,
yeah.
obviously that
I
sounds like
would
a huge
I would
pay
try to
scale.
deflect a little. I would try not to say it. Like even if they directly ask you and can ask you what you're making, I would try to say, I'm targeting $80,000 for my next role. So just like kind of deflect a little bit. And if they like really, get into it, don't just say like, oh, like I make 70K and a 10% bonus. My total income is $80,000, whatever. Sometimes they ask you to break it down though.
Mm.
So I see like, look, sometimes you're just gonna have to like tell them if you're in a state where they're allowed to ask you that. But I would say that you can increase it a little. There's nothing wrong with that, with jazzing up, especially if you know you're about to get a promotion or there's about to be like a merit increase or a new pay cycle where within like 2 months, you're going to be making $5,000 more. I would just say the $5,000
Yeah.
more. But yeah, always try to be like, I'm targeting X number.
Okay. And I would say, like, I do know a couple of recruiters, and I will say, like, the recruiters get based off what you get hired for that salary. And so, like, they should be going to bat for you. They should get the highest salary that they can for you. Sometimes it's just easier to place you, obviously, if your salary is a little bit lower, but like, don't feel like you have to, like, take a pay decrease to, like, get this job. Like, recruiters should
Yeah.
also be going to bat for you because it's going to affect how much they're making on this
Yeah.
transaction as well.
And I would say like sometimes there's an expectation of a negotiation. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, can I negotiate? Sometimes they're like, they go lower because they expect you, like they give you, they can pay you 70. So they give you a $65,000 offer because they think you might ask for 75 so you can land on 70.
Yeah.
And you should be doing the same, right? You should go above what you would really take in the end.
Yeah.
So I think it's common practice. It's just getting confident with having that conversation, but you're not going to offend them.
Cool. So I think we beat a dead horse with that. Like I think that was such good information about like how to, increase your salary if you're on the job or if you're accepting job offers right now and things like that. And you have so much insight working in HR. This is actually really insightful. You think you know what people do, but then you don't know like all the ins and outs. And not that we've gotten to like all the ins and outs of HR, but it's just some interesting
Yeah.
aspects that you don't see on the outside. Um, I wanted to talk just really briefly about like a little bit more personally about you and how like what was your starting salary and then how are you personally able to grow that and like kind of like how you ended. Like I want people to know like if they want to get into HR and they want to climb that ladder a little bit, like what can they expect for a salary in New York City, for example, since that's your experience.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I worked for about 5 years before I went back to business school. And I was not in the world of HR. I was actually in sales. So I did this unique transition. Not a lot of people that go to business school end up in HR. So I think I had this leg up as far as salary goes, because as I mentioned, there's sort of this like MBA school is like this equalizer for salaries. So right out of school, I was making 100K. And I went to a company with a few other friends from business school. None of them went into HR, but they went into finance roles inside of the company and strategy roles. And I was paid just the same as them. And like a lot of people are surprised, oh, HR doesn't, but like the benefit of business school and the benefit of a company that values someone with a business mind in an HR role is huge. So
Okay.
I was looking at companies specifically I had no HR experience. So I was looking for companies that were very much like in the world of HR, they're like, we're business people first and then HR second. So if you understand the business and how it works and what the goals are, like you can help advise them from a people perspective. So like, what is it about the business decisions that impact the people, that impact the organization, the behavior, the culture, all that kind of stuff. So I think because I had a unique background that they desired, I was paid very well. And trust me, they made it clear, oh, you're on the high end of the range for your role. Like, they like to like make sure because come, at performance review time, like, whatever. I was like, okay. So it was 100K, and I think it was a 10% bonus. And I got also a $20,000 sign-on bonus.
Oh, wow.
So
So the
yeah,
first year you're essentially making $130,000.
yeah. And I was 27, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
So, so that was a great start. But as I said, the first salary is the most important to negotiate. I didn't have a lot of negotiation room there, and I felt very happy with that. But from then on, it was like a little more, a little more. And it was like forever. It was like it moved so slowly. And it definitely was harder from there because like you're just starting, you're in this new career. And for me, the biggest jumps in my salary came from when I switched companies.
Okay. Because then you have more
So
negotiation power at the beginning.
absolutely. And I was recruited. So I won't name all the company names. I was recruited from the first company out of business school to the second company by someone who knew me from the first.
Mm.
And so I wasn't looking. So that's huge. You have a lot of negotiation power when you didn't apply. When someone gives you a call, a recruiter gives you a call, you weren't looking for a job and they want you. And she knew me. And like, I was like a very good fit for the role. And they, they really paid me a lot more. So I don't remember all the numbers, but I certainly remember the base salary was like 20K more than I was making. And then I think I went to like, instead of like a 10% bonus, like a 20% bonus or something like that.
Wow. So we're like at $120,000 base with a 20%.
I think I was making like 140, 150 or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds like it.
But like, I want people to keep in mind, like these are big Fortune 500 corporations. So they're not your startup that's like scrappy. So I just want to put that in context because I don't think these are the most common numbers in HR roles in all organizations.
Yeah. I was talking to my dad about it actually last night, and I was like, because he used to be in HR, and I was like, how much did you make when you were in HR? And he's like, why? And it was like so many years ago, so I can't even remember. And I was like, well, my friend, I don't want to spill the beans. I don't know if I'm spilling the beans here, but you ended around like $200,000. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And he was just like, what? I don't know about that. And I'm like, she did. Like, what do you want me to say? And um, he was like, well, I didn't make anything close to that when I was in HR. But we
Also,
also,
like in Iowa too, like, so first of all, that makes a difference. We're talking
huge
about New York
difference.
City. We're talking about New York City. We're talking about Fortune, probably 50 companies. And we're talking about like, I mean, I don't know what level your dad was at. I know he's raised in the ranks since he was HR role, but like I was in like, getting into more senior levels.
Yeah.
Um, And after that, I switched actually to two more companies. And one of them was like, we can meet you where you are. We cannot go higher than what you are, or whatever. But I got in at that level. And then like I was at my last company I was there for like 3.5 years. So then it went up. And then, eventually the base was more like 165-ish with like a 20% bonus. So it was like almost 200.
Wow.
And that's what I left to start my own business. Oh my gosh, am I
But I
crazy?
think that makes it even like more special that, money talks and it's so hard to walk away from sometimes, and people get stuck in jobs they hate because it pays so well. So the fact that you can recognize how much money you're making and still walk away to be like, I liked it. You didn't dislike your job, but to be like, I have something else that's better that I want to pursue. Like that's really special. And shows you're really
Right. But
motivated.
I think like, look, and this is a lot about what I talk about in my book, that people call what I was through, and I never called it this because I truly did like my job, but it's called the golden handcuffs, right? They're like, you're paid so much to do what you do, you cannot think of leaving. Like, how would I get paid the same amount to do something similar? Like, how would I do this? So there's that aspect. But people also get to a point where they realize, like, the money isn't really what's making me happy. Like, the work itself has to be exciting.
Yeah.
It has to like, energize you, give you room to play and innovate and create. It has to make you feel like you're providing value and making impact some way. Like, you can develop your skills and have new experiences. Like, that's what's going to make you want to get up in the morning. And like, yeah, some people, like, it's about the paycheck, and I'm not judging that, because truly people have like lots of financial obligations that, like, yeah, money has to be the priority. But if you're in a situation where it doesn't have to be, where you have your safety net aside and you can take more risks and try new things and find like more joy from your job, like, I mean, that's what I wanted, so that's what I went for.
That's amazing. Sarah, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry we haven't even like mentioned like where to find you, where to buy your book, all of that good stuff. So please like spill everything where we should follow you on, where we can buy your book, all of that good information.
Thanks. So my book is called Remotivation: The Remote Worker's Ultimate Guide to Life-Changing Fulfillment. I talk about money in there. It's like the first thing I talk about because it tends to be the biggest challenge or obstacle that holds people back from like being truly fulfilled in their careers. So talk about our money, our identity, routines, growth, impact, and joy, like the 6 motivators that drive our decisions around our careers. So you can get that on Amazon, Remotivation, and then they can go to sarahaviram.com. Maybe you can like link to it
I'll link
and
everything in the description below.
yeah, sarahaviram.com. I do talks and workshops for organizations about finding more fulfillment in your careers. And I have a couple online courses on my website that anyone can take as well.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for being on here. This was so fun. I hope this was really insightful for all you guys. There was so much good information shared in this part 2 and part 1. If you haven't watched part 1, go back to, I'll just link it up here. So check it out. Part 1 as well. We talked about Sarah paying off her debt. Part 2 obviously was all about like how to increase your income and all of that. So Sarah, thanks again for coming on here.
My pleasure, Abby. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you guys next time on Not Your Father's Finance.